Dropping just before the holidays, we have a nice gift here from Square Enix in the form of the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo for Nintendo Switch 2, as well as the Xbox platforms. It's our first chance to get a hands-on with this game here in our own homes. I originally played the demo back at Gamescom, but then only in portable mode, and I was very impressed, but I was very curious to see how it would stack up on my actual display behind me. But of course, another man who also loves Final Fantasy VII Remake and decided to dig in is none other than Oliver Mackenzie. Who else?
Yes, John, I think this is a very appealing taster for the full Final Fantasy VII Remake series buffet that Switch 2 owners will soon have.
Absolutely, and it's good to have a fellow JRPG lover here on DF versus Alex, who just poo-poos them all day.
This video is brought to you by Digital Foundry and CyberPower PC. Click on the link below to access Christmas savings on a number of Corsair Infinity gaming PCs, starting with the Infinity C5, pairing a Ryzen 5 8400F with a Radeon 9060 XT and 32 gigs of RAM. The Infinity C6 ups specs to the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, the fastest CPU for gamers, along with the impressive Radeon RX 9070 XT. The Infinity C7 ramps up the specs still further with the monstrous GeForce RTX 5090 and WD Black SSD. All three offerings ship with a free game. A world-leading PC manufacturer with a 4.7-star Trustpilot rating, CyberPower PC is an official launch partner for PC component brands like Nvidia, AMD and Intel, with over 20 years of custom building experience. A 5-year warranty is offered on all of its desktops, alongside lifetime technical support. Oh, and free UK delivery. But there's more. Enter the CyberPower PC giveaway for a chance to win a Corsair Air 5400 gaming PC, pairing Ryzen 7 9700X with a GeForce RTX 5070 and 32 gigs of DDR5. Get your entries in by December the 19th. Check the video description below for more details.
If we recall, Final Fantasy VII Remake originally dropped in 2020, so more than 5 years ago. It's actually almost going to be 6 years here, because it was earlier in the year, on PlayStation 4, as promised. But it received an update called Intergrade that released on PlayStation 5 and the personal computer. And the basic idea there was that it offers some nice visual improvements, right? On PS5, you get 60 FPS, but you also got improved lighting and other changes and nips and tucks and things to sort of fix the issues that the PS4 version had, including the door texture, which was hugely upgraded. Is this the PS4 version, or is it the Intergrade version, Oliver?
Yeah, well, on the tin, it says Intergrade. And it is true, actually, when you take a look at it, that it is the Intergrade version. It does look like the Intergrade version. If you compare the PS4 version and PS5 version against Switch 2, you can pretty clearly see that the Switch 2 version is based on those integrated changes. Like you can see in this opening shot here, the lighting presentation on Switch 2 matches PS5, like the opening shot with all the new volumetrics on Switch 2 and PS5, not so much on PS4. This shot, though, conversely has stronger volumetrics on PS4, and the Switch 2 and PS5 have a similar appearance. This shot is also dramatically darker on PS4 than the other two versions, and in this shot, the light here is shadow casting on Switch 2 and PS5, but not on the PS4 version. So I think basically like the developers have basically gone through the game with the Intergrade release, made all kinds of changes to lighting, harnessing the power of the PS5 to use more volumetric effects, to use more physically plausible volumetric effects, plus improved SSR. They added lights all over the place. They added even shadow casting lights in some areas like we saw earlier. That's all present on PS5, and it's also present on Switch 2. The only obvious lighting deficiency on Switch 2 to me lies in shadows, which appear more similar to PS4 in the shots I tested, but also they have a stronger dithered appearance around their edges.
Yeah.
That kind of soft look. Yeah, on Switch 2. The other major change in the Intergrade lies in the texture art, because the texture streaming was improved quite a lot. Obviously, on PS5, you have the advantage of improved decompression hardware. You have the advantage of the SSD. You have a lot of advantages there in terms of your streaming over your 5400 RPM laptop drive that might have been in your PS4 console. And a lot of the textures were also upgraded on top of that. But unfortunately, in the content that we have on Switch 2, at least in my kind of relatively cursory look, I was not able to deduce many asset differences. But I did look back in May at some footage that Nintendo published around that time. Again, this is prior to the Switch 2's release. And I spotted what seemed to be a pretty clear asset upgrade on Switch 2 compared to PS4 with this seventh heaven sign in the bar. So I think overall here, the Switch 2 is getting the advantage of having the integrated visual features. At least in this area, it's harder to say about later game segments. And those later game segments are more compelling, I think, with the much larger town areas that had considerable struggles on PS4 with keeping all assets resident in RAM, like we saw with that infamous door that would never load in. Indeed, with asset streaming, it was kind of embarrassing. I mean, it was quite an experience. But that was that was almost completely resolved on PS5. And I would expect that to also be pretty much resolved on Switch 2, but it remains to be seen exactly how far that will go on Switch 2 in later areas.
Yeah, that's probably a good way to look at it then. Indeed, the Switch 2 is certainly faster when it comes to streaming data versus a 5400 RPM laptop drive in the PS4. So, but as you note, this demo only covers the early part of the game here around the Mako reactors. So we can't take a look at the towns, and those are very specifically where the PS4 version struggled. But right out of the gate, though, I really do feel that they've done an amazing job of sort of capturing the look of the game here, and it does indeed offer those Intergrade features, but with some changes, as you noted. The other little thing I noticed that might just be reflective of the demo version, I don't know, is that the FMV quality, the very intro, the FMV is seemingly of lower quality. So it's like a lower resolution, lower compression rate. Thus, it looks more noisy with macro blocking and other artifacts throughout. So, but, given that space is a premium when dealing with the Switch 2, I guess I can understand why they might do that. And thankfully, I feel like most cutscenes in this game were actually real time. So, should be okay. So, yeah, that's all looking good. The other thing I wanted to point out straight away is that the HDR implementation here is excellent. It was hard to perceive this at Gamescom on the portable screen, and still is, because the portable screen just doesn't do the job. But on a proper HDR display, the highlights absolutely pop. There is a really nice contrast range between the darker stuff, which is not washed out, and the bright highlights. Like when you're flinging your sword around in HDR, the sparks can be eye-searingly bright in a way that I found pretty cool. And of course, in that early Midgar area, there's so many bright spotlights and like individual lights points everywhere, right? And those just look cool when you're looking out across the land. So if you can play it on a good HDR screen, that's the way to go. But let's talk a little bit about image quality and performance then. So what's interesting here is that it doesn't actually look comparable to any of the prior console versions in terms of raw image quality. It's actually a little soft, if you will, and smooth, yet still clear enough. But there is some weirdness that we'll talk about as well that makes it look a little dithered, shall we say. But what did you find here overall, Oliver?
Yeah, I found the kind of aliasing presentation here to be interesting because obviously the existing console versions of the game, at least, and also the PC version because it doesn't have DLSS support, they all use the UE4 TAA, basically, which has certain distinctive characteristics. Like you can see in these shots, the Sony consoles that we're looking at here have shimmering and image breakup, courtesy of like the UE4 TAA and its jittering. Well, Switch 2 looks much more stable, which is an interesting divergence there. But anything in this shot that is moving tends to expose really raw edges on Switch 2. Like even Cloud's idle animations will cause his sword to significantly alias. That's an interesting divergence.
There's like a border around it. Like right when his head moves, it like leaves like a strange dithered looking area behind, which is different than we usually see with TAA artifacts. So it's very, very unique the way it presents here.
Yeah, and then there are some other weird tells where like Switch 2, if you look at Cloud's hair, right? Yes. It tends to preserve the dithering patterns in his hair instead of averaging them, which produces a rougher result in some shots. Now, hair cards in FF7R really lean on dithering, basically, and lean on anti-aliasing to produce a good-looking, semi-transparent appearing final result from that dithered input. But their appearance is quite different here. on Switch 2 relative to the PlayStation consoles, I would say. I think the outcome here is likely that Switch 2 is using a DLSS variant, but it's probably one of the cheaper ones, I think, because it has all the characteristics that we tend to look for in light DLSS or tiny DLSS, in the sense that we are seeing some things that aren't being reconstructed, perhaps to the utmost, to the best of their ability here. And we're seeing a lot of aliasing in motion, but actually in stills, we're seeing a very clean and stable result when the camera is at rest. We actually do see a very clean and stable result, which is kind of like what we see with tiny DLSS, where in motion it tends to fall apart, but in stills it's like a fantastic result. Internally, in dock mode, it counts at 1080p on Switch 2. PS4 is 1080p as well. I'm looking at PS5 performance mode as well here, and it's 1512p. I'm not sure what the output target is on Switch 2, but it looks subjectively similar to PS5 in performance mode and clearer than PS4. But obviously, it's hard to compare this pretty reasonably sharp, reasonably clean DLSS Lite or whatever, compared to the fairly blurry TAA that's otherwise being used. It kind of muddies any kind of pixel count comparisons or precision comparisons, anything like that. Beyond that, performance is a locked 30 FPS, except I spotted one or two brief stutters on Switch 2. But I know that in prior showings, the game appeared to have some frame pacing problems in its docked configuration. But whatever those issues were, the current game in its demo form here on Switch 2 is running just fine without any kind of frame pacing problems whatsoever.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. It's completely stable, feels very smooth and correct, which is excellent. Interestingly, one thing we didn't look at here, obviously, is compared to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where I actually think Switch 2 docked looks better than the performance modes that were originally in 7 Rebirth on the PS5. It's actually, image quality is good, and despite being what seems to be a tiny DLS, as Alex likes to call it, it doesn't have anywhere near the breakup of something like Fast Fusion, right? It is a slower game, and it doesn't have that sort of issue to the same degree. So I do think general image quality is quite okay. The only weird thing I noticed, and I'm not really sure yet what to make about this, is there's areas where there's a strange, almost dither present in the world and across surfaces, which I've never really seen before, where it's so soft looking that it almost looks like something intentional, but I don't think it's a desirable effect. And it's especially obvious when surfaces are occluded and then reappear, where it sort of reveals this underlying pattern. But again, because of the softness of it, it ends up looking strange, and it's something we've not really seen in the other versions. It's very specific to this one. I can't say it's necessarily a bad thing, but it's interesting. I will say, though, again, in portable mode, you kind of can't pick up on a lot of this because this much smaller screen does a great job hiding it. And it's really, really beautiful in portable mode. It's very impressive, aside from, the screen deficiencies. But it does still admittedly hold up pretty darn well on a large modern screen. So, sitting close to a 77-inch screen can be very bad for some Switch 2 games. But this one actually holds up. But yeah, as I said, obviously portable mode is going to be an area where it shines just in terms of overall sharpness. And obviously that's how I saw it at Gamescom, and it still looks great here. But did we actually get any metrics on the portable mode stuff? I think you went through it and looked closer, Oliver, yeah?
I did get some metrics out of portable mode, which I can share with you right now. So basically, the image quality side of things in portable mode, it appears to be upsampling to 1080p. It produces a very sharp and clean final output in the handheld mode there on that 8-inch display, 7.9-inch display, 1080p panel. So it appears very 1080p like, but internally it seems to be about 720p in the shots that I tested. But there were also some shots that were coming in a little bit lower than that, which I think might come down to some low-res post-processing or possibly DRS, but my expectation is that typically it's about 720p internal being upsampled to 1080p. That's what it appears like on Switch 2.
We haven't seen any versions of this game that use DRS, right? If I recall.
No, I know at least the PlayStation 5 version uses DRS, yes. In Performance mode, I know it can go down to like 1152p from 1512p, and I think in quality mode it goes down to 1800p from my recollection from, I think,
Right.
Tom's
So
coverage back in the day. There is
thus
some
it's
DRS in
entirely
some versions.
so it's entirely possible that they are actually leveraging DRS to some degree here on Switch. We just haven't. It's just difficult to gauge this when looking at portable stuff because we don't have a proper capture solution yet for Switch 2 in portable mode.
Portable mode capture is kind of a fraught exercise. You need to be okay with stills and things like that, which I'm sure you can see here because we're predominantly comparing stills. But yeah, I think this looks pretty good. Overall, in terms of visual settings, it appears very similar to docked mode. Shadows look slightly different and less precise, perhaps. But overall, I mean, I'm sure there's some cuts here and there, but it looks very similar. There's definitely some significant breakup in motion, though, I would say, with that image quality because of that use of the tiny DLSS model, which obviously is being pushed a little bit here. It's not being pushed nearly as far as you'd see in a game like Fast Fusion, which has extremely fast motion and is operating from much lower resolutions than we're seeing here. And it's not bothersome on the display itself, I would say. And I think you really do appreciate as well the fact that you can hold the Switch up to your eyes and peer into that panel, and you're getting that perfect pixel match for the output of the display. And it's like super clean and super clear, and that's just like a really pleasant experience. In terms of performance in portable mode, it seems to be 30 FPS for the most part. I did note some obvious dips like in the opening sequence here, so it's not flawless, but the demo largely seems to be 30 FPS on Switch 2, including the big boss sequence that you have, some 15 minutes into the game or so. So again, it's harder to say for the larger game because the larger game is more demanding. It has more interesting kind of performance scenarios in it. But I would say overall the result here on Switch 2 in handheld mode, I'd actually say it's pretty comparable to the PlayStation 4. Obviously, output to a big high-resolution TV, which is pretty impressive. And I think that speaks to the advantages that you get from this much more modern architecture, and obviously the use of machine learning-based upscaling, which prior versions of this game have not availed themselves of. This is kind of the first time that we're actually seeing Square Enix implement a proper temporal upscaler in a version of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
That's very true, indeed. Though obviously on Rebirth they have experience adding PSSR to the mix, which is still one of the best examples of PSSR, I'd say. Quite a game changer in that case. It's actually, so I do think that what we're seeing here on Switch, it is honestly arguably one of the best looking games on the Switch 2 as is, but it also got me thinking about Rebirth in the future, like how well they'll be able to translate that game over to the Switch 2, because that is a significantly more demanding title with very large open maps compared to this one. But still, very exciting to see it come out. But it's not just Switch 2 that received a demo. And I have not seen this myself, but I'm curious. You did actually take a brief look at the Xbox version, yeah? And it seems like, based on your impressions, it's really good.
That's true. That's true. So I took a very cursory look at the Xbox versions, which hassled me slightly about including some Xbox coverage. So I thought I'd discuss it briefly. But yeah, basically, I don't want to spend too much time on them here, but Series S and Series X have two graphical modes, a graphics and a performance mode, just like PS5, right? PS5 has graphics and performance. Likewise for Series S and Series X. They target 30 FPS and 60 FPS respectively, and both do a good job of hitting those frame rates in the content that I selected. So across these two consoles, 2 modes per console, basically 4 configurations, good performance. Series X seems to be the same setup as PS5 in performance mode and in quality mode, as it often does. So that's 1512p in performance mode and 4K in graphics mode. Again, possibility of dynamic resolution there, like on PS5. I did not observe that in my testing, very limited testing. Series S in graphics mode appears to be about 1440p, and in performance mode appears to be about 1080p. I think that's quite positive. I was really more concerned about the Series S side of things, because obviously games don't only scale that amazing to Series S, but this is a PS4 game at its heart.
And we're talking Switch 2 as well, and the Series S is mostly more capable than the Switch 2, so...
Yeah, especially considering, like, this is like this is not pushing, like, ray tracing or anything like that. Exactly. Like, it should scale, like, quite well. Twice a Switch 2 or something. I actually noted, not to belabor this, not to go into too many details here, but I actually did notice that Series S, even at 1440p, it wasn't quite as crisp as Switch 2 at its internal 1080p. So there is some maybe the UE4 TAA, which I think is still in use on the series consoles, a little bit soft looking. Maybe switch to its upsampling to a higher resolution. Again, it's hard to say there, but it does actually. The tiny DLSS is producing great results, at least in stills, which I thought was really impressive. So, I mean, overall, yeah, I think it's cool. I think it's great. It's a great accommodation for the Switch 2 hardware that it's actually producing a better result in some meaningful ways, right? Relative to a notionally much more powerful home console. It's important to put this port into context, or at least what we know of this port into context, because it is a demo. It's not the full game. But it's like, I don't think this is like an impossible port. This is basically a PS4 game at its core. You'd expect this to port well. But even still, it's like pretty impressive. Like in handheld mode, you're getting a 1080p like kind of game there with great visuals. Like it's super impressive in handheld mode. I think it probably compares favorably to something like the Steam Deck as well, where you're dealing with a lower resolution panel, where you don't have quite that same level of clarity as you're getting here. And it runs at a pretty stable 30 FPS, which is a satisfying experience. And like input lag, everything feels good, feels reasonably responsive. In docked mode, it looks very clear, looks quite nice, has that higher resolution support. And obviously they're taking advantage of DLSS there as well to improve image quality considerably. So I think this is like basically the best you could probably realistically expect. The only thing it's missing is like maybe high frame rate support. Maybe a 40 FPS mode would have been nice to see. But I think realistically, looking at what the Switch 2 is typically delivered in PS4 class ports, this is a really good experience. And I'm actually really happy with the way things are going. And I'm excited to see the full game. I'm excited to hopefully play more of the full game personally when it does come out on Switch 2, because I think this is a really intriguing portable experience. And I'm probably about ripe for a Final Fantasy VII Remake replay. Yeah, at this point. So
I just want to see how the Switch 2 handles the Shinra cafeteria with all the chairs running around. Like that's the best part of the game, running around the cafeteria, like sending all the furniture flying. But yeah, no, I mean, so here we are. It's promising stuff, and this is, we're both big fans of this game. I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that it's now available on more platforms. They basically covered the gamut at this point, and I think it's a bright spot for everyone. And certainly, it's great for Switch 2 owners to finally have something like this on the way. I knew a lot of owners of Switch 1 that was their primary console that love RPGs like this, and they had really wanted to play it and just never had a chance due to the lack of the hardware. So those people that have upgraded to Switch 2 should be served well here. And Xbox as well. It's great to see it. Like when this was first announced in the Year of Dreams 2015, I don't think anybody thought it would be coming to Xbox at all. But here we are 10 years later. There it is. We got it. So yeah, good stuff all around. But that's going to do it for this video, I think, Oliver. So thanks for all the investigative work.
A pleasure as always, John.
And thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you next time.